Godless Procession is a gothic rock band that started in Guadalajara, Mexico in 2010. They released their first self-titled album in 2011. The sound was a melancholy guitar-driven post-punk rock with a slight death rock touch, but it was singer Victor Hugo Baron's dramatic, bordering on operatic vocals that made the band really stand out. The band's dramatics and aesthetics helped them toe the line between goth and metal, so it should be no surprise that their 2018 album Laments takes on a bit of a symphonic metal sound as well. Laments differs in many ways from Godless Procession's previous album, namely the use of heavier guitars and a more overtly dramatic, almost soundtrack-like quality. There's even a violin added. Yes, I checked. It was in fact a real violin, not violin sounds on a synthesizer or another string instrument, and you can go on their Facebook page and see photos in concert of band member Gabriel Ruiz fiddling away. Those of you who know me in real life may be surprised to hear me talking about the violin in a positive way, because you know that the violin is one of my least favorite instruments, because I think it is screechy and am a self-hating soprano who can't stand super high pitches. Team cello. That being said, it's used well here. It adds a nice emotionality to the music. I'm not saying that other more typical rock and roll instruments utilized can't express emotion, but there's a certain manner of expression I feel is specific to members of the violin family, and I'm glad it was utilized here. There's also some organ sounds, though I am certain this was electronically created, to give us the whole dark mass feel that they go for a lot. Another thing, while I believe all the songs in their previous album were in Spanish, 3 of the songs on this album, 4 if you count a remix of one, are in English. I thought that this decision was not necessarily a bad one, but I was surprised, as English is a historically difficult language to sing in, especially in the more classical style that Baron is known for singing in. It's very consonant heavy with weird syllable emphases, whereas Latin-based languages like Spanish, which the rest of the songs are in, is a more ideal language for this style of singing. Then again, I had another singing instructor once say that whatever your predominant language is technically the hardest one to sing in because you're used to how it sounds spoken, so maybe it's the same logic here. I don't know whether it was an artistic decision in that they thought particular songs would sound better in English, or if it was an attempt to connect to English-speaking audiences, especially after backing up some English-speaking musical acts who performed in Mexico. But that's something I noticed. Another thing I need to point out is, as I mentioned them going more metal, albeit not very heavy metal, it raises that question. Well, are they still goth, or are they just metal now? Maybe this isn't as big of an issue anymore, but I remember as a young bat in the early 2000s. I was a preteen, so it's not as if I was going to goth clubs, so my main source on goth was the internet. Back then, there was still a lot of annoyance amongst goths about the conflation between goth and metal culture, the idea that the only dark alternative music out there was metal. This led to some of the more passionate types saying that goth and metal were totally different and separate, and no true goth would ever play or enjoy metal. Certainly, not all metal is goth, and not all goth is metal, but goth metal is a thing, and I think this album definitely qualifies. Aside from the sounds associated with goth music during their non-distorted moments, that bass guitar murmur and the more twangish guitar, I think that there's a feeling emitted that is just the visceral sensation of the gothic, as in a pre-goth sort of gothic. Something in that dissonant sound and the emotive lyrics gives off an evocative feeling of a gothic horror film or novel. Remember what I said about the soundtrack-like quality of the sound? I'm not sure if this symphonic metal direction is the direction that the band has decided to go in as a whole, what with their time spent with various metal acts and Baron's very metal voice, or if this is just a one-album thing, as this is only their second album. Maybe all of their albums will be different subgenres, who knows? We'll see when their next album comes out. That being said, wherever they go next, I do think this was a good direction for them. And I say that as someone who's not usually a huge metalhead, though my exceptions do tend to be metal of the symphonic variety, for which this definitely qualifies. If you like the clips you heard and how I described it, I suggest you give this album a listen. It's on Bandcamp and Spotify and some other streaming platforms as well. While you're at it, I also recommend that you listen to some of their first album and see how the two compare. For more goth Latin American content, I suggest you follow my social media platforms, which will be linked below. Talk to you next time. Bye.
Emociones que se olvidan, no besos que se entienden.